If you would like to add questions or comments in chat, please do, and Tom will answer those right after he finishes this program. So just add your questions in the chat box as you think of them. We'll get to them afterwards.
Oh, so that's on.
Welcome to Leesburg Public Library, and welcome to our friend Tom Wilcox.
Aloha. I am still in my Hawaiian vacation mode. Yes, retired people do take vacations. And at this time last week, I was knocking back a very well-deserved Mai Tai from my strenuous walking tour of downtown Honolulu. So without further ado, I am taking off my hat, now that you've all seen it, and let's get started here. So I thought this was an intriguing title, Central Florida's Lost Towns. How does a town get lost? Well, this is how it does. First of all, I want to quote, these are the sources I use for this program, some commercial websites, Rick Reed's column Daily Commercial in 2019. And we actually have an online list of all of his articles, and we have the microfilm and CDs of the papers. So if you're interested in learning more about Leesburg, Lake County, it's really well worth reading. But anyway, some of these things are really, really good to look at. All right, now we're going to talk about how viable towns somehow disappeared. And this is actually the Mob Barker House, which is no longer in Lake County. It was moved across the lake to Marion County. But we're lucky that there actually was still a remaining place, because many times now these towns have been gone for so long that you could stand right in the middle of where the town was and not even know it. In fact, we'll see a little bit more about this later. Right. Now, everybody thinks ghost towns are in the Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico. I've actually seen one or two. In fact, a couple in the Southwest are actually have become tourist centers where they have Wild West gang fights and all that stuff. And but there are actually some here in Lake County and surrounding counties, and there are actually quite a few in this state, and we'll go into why they're no longer around. So from the state library source, I found Florida as a state is supposed to have some 350 ghost towns within the state borders. And there's very, very little visible sign that any of them ever existed. And this is an example. This is a picture of a hiker standing in what was once a town. Many of the towns in Lake County are now in the environs of the Ocala National Forest. And if you know where to look, you'll find small cemeteries, foundations, a few other things. And these are the reasons why a town becomes a ghost. There's a local industry collapse, which we'll cover a couple of times. Sometimes they get absorbed by a larger town or city. Extreme weather, which we will get into. The county seat moves, and actually that is a real hot button issue, because in my own county, home county of Citrus, there was a situation that when the voters in 1887 voted to make Inverness the city, the county seat, the former county seat manager refused to give up the records, and they had to send in the sheriff to use the full authority of the county to get the records moved to Inverness, because it really was sort of life and death to a lot of towns to be the county seat. Mm-hmm. And the railroad bypasses the town. That's also, believe it or not, still a current issue. I was reading an article not long ago that the state of Florida built a bypass on Route 301 to go around Stark instead of having to go through it. And I mean, the store people and restaurant people in that town noticed a noticeable drop in business. Now, they're hardly going to be a ghost town about this, but you can see how that can affect things. Also, new technologies, and we'll get into a little bit more of that, how some towns died because of that. Now, here's Leesburg's ghost town. It was called Bamboo. And it was founded in the mid 1880s, and it actually had a post office until 1890. And this is what happened to it. It had the big Florida freeze, citrus freeze of 1894-95, dealt a death blow to a lot of these towns around here, because that's why people moved here. They set up orange groves, grapefruit groves, all sorts of groves. And I mean, the freeze was so severe that the mother of Miami, Julia Tuttle, she sent orange blossoms to Henry Flagler to show him that the freeze had not reached Miami. And that's why he extended his railroad down there and eventually to Key West. So and what happened was that the whole thing, the town was reduced to 30 people, and then the sawmill closed, and then the post office closed, and everybody just sort of drifted away. And actually, if you're ever wondering where it is, if you go head on west on Main Street to State Road 44 at the intersection of 44 and 468 County Road, where the Circle K gas station is, that's where the sawmill was. And here's another town called ACRON. Sometimes it's called ACRON. And this is one of the ones in the Ocala State Forest. And let's see what those say. Okay, it was established in the late 19th century, and it's best known as the town where Walter Elias Disney and Flora Call lived. Yes, these are the parents of Roy and Walt Disney. And they actually were Lake County people. And one of the reasons why Disney World is here is that Walt used to come and visit relatives here, and he knew Central Florida quite well. And but for a while, it was a big thing. In 1885, it was described as inducements to immigrants are cheap homes, pleasant climate, and of course, Florida has been flogging its climate ever since people started coming here, and school and church privileges. But it was not easy to get to. It took literally a 20-hour trip by steamboat and mule-driven wagon to get from Jacksonville to this town. And that probably contributed to the town's demise, because the railroad didn't go there, and it just gradually drifted away. However, one of the things people found was an illegible license plate, so it actually survived long enough into the automobile era. And so some of these towns were quite tenacious in their way. And now Conant was founded by wealthy English people who wanted to have a nice climate and not have to be in Britain during the winter. And this shows this huge hotel that was there. And but anyway, it was named for one of the backers of the Southern Railway system. And from what I understand, one of the things that actually ditched this town was that the English did not want to mix with the locals, and the locals decided that they were snooty, according to some reports, and that the English were very adverse to any manual labor. And this town was also impacted by the big freeze. I'm not going to say 1894, 95 anymore. It's just a big freeze. And eventually, this town became just a railroad platform. And most of the former environs of this town are in the borders of Lady Lake and the villages. And here's Eldorado. This image was actually of a train crossing. This was like 5 miles southeast of present-day Leesburg. And the fare to ride this railway along Lake Harris was to 15 cents, which sounds cheap to us, but that was good fare at the time in the 1800s, late 1800s. And actually, people who had donated land to the right of way of the railroad could ride for free. And what they would do is that the railroad would connect to Astor, where you could take a river steamer. And it actually had a post office, and it operated from 1886 to 1910. And they say that, according to my sources here, the name of the town originated from the golden color of one of the local citrus crops, Eldorado gold. There's a tantalizing story about a missing Army payroll in Lake County. And here's the story according to Rick Reed. He wrote that Emmett Peter wrote a very interesting story about Indian Springs. So he's quoting another author. And legend has it that a fortune in gold and silver coins is hidden at Indian Springs near Sorrento. And it says here that a company of soldiers carrying an Army payroll during the Seminole War was ambushed at the spring, and a lieutenant hid the money in the water or nearby to keep the Indians from finding it. Supposedly, it consists of $25,000 in gold coins. And I would believe that because in my last program about the Florida Seminole Wars, the United States spent $20 million in the Second Seminole War. That's how seriously they took it. It would be $500 million in our money. So that was quite a chunk of change. But there was the Florida State Gazetteer in 1886-87 mentions it, but doesn't really say anything about it. So they didn't think very much of this town. We finally get to Kismet. I've often speculated about why they named this, because Kismet in Islam means, Arabic means fate. And I think, since this was based on land speculation, they thought maybe it was fated to be successful. So they named the town after it. And, the only thing that the Florida Gazetteer said about it was that they had a post office. And, but here's a very significant thing about Kismet. Kismet's most famous, and this is from a blog called All Things Walt, and this is Walter Elias, Disney, and Flora Call. It's very possibly a wedding photo because the clothes seem to indicate that it could very possibly be. And so this is around the time of their marriage. And we'll get back to them a little later. Here's another town called Lake Dorr, and it was a stop on the St. John's and Lake Eustis Railway. And it was founded by a George Pittman in 1883. They had a newspaper, a bank, and a Methodist church, as well as this school called the Grassy Pond School, pictured here. And I love this picture because my father was educated in a school like this until he went to the Consolidated School in Winston-Salem in North Carolina. So these things are around a lot longer than you think. And here's another one called St. Francis Old Town. It's funny that before I go from Kismet, that picture of the hotel was actually in Eustis, but they dismantled the hotel and rebuilt it in Eustis. Unfortunately, it no longer exists. It was torn down in the 50s, but that's where when Kismet just sort of disappeared, they took the hotel. And now here's where we get into technology in St. Francis Old Town, because it was built to serve St. John's River traffic, which was very substantial. A lot of the pictures you see of old Florida on the Florida Memory Site and other books and everything show a lot of small steamers that could carry about maybe 30, 40 people flying up and down the Ocklawaha, the St. John's, all the rivers in the state. They were the original roads, but gradually, more roads were built, railroads were built, and that's what happened to this, because you could ship things much faster by railroad than by steamboat. And so this is also part of the Ocala National Forest. And it shows you what a big place the forest actually is. Now, in nearby Sumter County, they have a crossroads called Linden, and it's at State Road 50 and County Road 179. And the only thing really there from about the original founding is a cemetery, Linden Cemetery. And so they actually have descendants actually have an annual picnic. I'm not sure if they were able to do it this year or last year, but they've done this. What I thought was really interesting was that the postmaster came from New Jersey and he named it after his hometown. And it's a town I know very well because I lived in Edison, which is about 25 miles, not even, it's probably closer to 15 miles south of Linden. And I went through that town on New Jersey Transit every single morning for years. Now this one, the ACRON community in Pasco County, it actually was founded by German immigrants, and ACRON means place of honor in their language. And it had a hotel, a school, and a post office. But today, the only thing that's left is this cemetery. And it even says if they have a marker, and sometimes that's all that's left of a town that you can really see. Suddenly you're walking in the Ocala National Forest or some other place, and all of a sudden you'll see this burial ground, 10, 15, 20 graves. And that was the town cemetery. This is interesting, Trilby. I mean, I thought this was so cool. This has been a goal of mine. I ride my bike on the Wilcox Trail, and I've always meant to strike further down. I've gotten to Istachata, which is pretty close to Trilby. It just crosses the line into Pasco from my county, Citrus. And, it would make it much easier for me if there was a place where I could sort of hang out, like in a restaurant or something, but there isn't anything there. Its population in 2020 is 433 people, down actually slightly up from 2010, which was 419. And so it's just got a couple of buildings and everything, but I included it because I was just fascinated by the name, and we'll go into that. Hey, he said, Trilby, what kind of name was that? And it was actually the founder's wife suggested this. She had read the novel, and this is actually a picture from the London production. And it was named after a popular novel. It was a huge stage hit in London and in New York. And what it was is that it was actually a character, and we still know his name called Svengali. And he hypnotizes Trilby, an artist model, and forces her to become a popular singer under his spell. I mean, sounds very melodramatic to us, but it worked very, very well for them. And actually, the book itself sold a reported 200,000 copies, which was quite the thing. And it went all over the place. But what happened was that it eventually, faded out to what it is now. But what I thought was really interesting, the author's name of Trilby was Georges du Maurier. And if du Maurier sounds somewhat vaguely familiar, there is a reason. his daughter, Daphne du Maurier, wrote Rebecca and Jamaica Inn, as well as many other novels. And this is the only thing I could find on the Florida Memory website. This it was big enough to have a substantial train station, but actually its glory days had already passed. I mean, it had a number of stores, general stores, hardware stores. A lot of people lived there, but what happened is that, according to Scott Black, who wrote an article, it's called The History of Trilby from Boomtown to Ashes, and it was literally that. The ashes came from a fire in 1925 that, I mean, they took hours to try and control, and the whole life went out of the town. It just withered away. It never recovered from that fire. Now, lest we keep repeating ourselves, I decided to switch over, and now you see there's a plethora of all these towns that just disappeared in just central Florida area alone. I didn't even have to go to Marion County or anything. But now we get to the point, how do I find one? I mean, yeah, I want to go out and see one, even though it's a brick this high, I want to see it. So let's go over and learn more about how you can do this. First of all, come to the Leesburg Library. Hey, we have this book. It's in our Florida room, historic photos of Florida ghost towns. We also have we also have some very good back roads and trails of Florida. We actually have a wonderful book, which you'll see at the very end. I'll explain more about that I found invaluable. And also the State Library in Tallahassee, because they have a vast collection of what they call Floridiana. And they have something like thousands of things that you can actually go and see. Some of them they post online on the Florida Memory, so I would always check that. And many things are available by interlibrary loan. And now, with that proviso, I have to say that right now, to my knowledge, Lake County does not have interlibrary loan. But I know when I was still working here, we were talking about joining a new state library initiative. And when we join, then we will have it. But they have literally thousands, something like 65,000 items. So quite a bit, which is pretty good, because Florida really didn't start collecting Florida history until the 1950s. We really should have started much longer ago than that. And it takes a lot of vision to do that, because one of the things I saw in Honolulu is a museum called the Bishop Museum, and the Bishop started to collect artifacts and things about not only Hawaii, but Greater Polynesia. And they started in 1889, while the Hawaiian monarchy was still on the throne. So they did a really good job there. And this is the state's library's online catalog, so you can see if they've got something, and there are ways to see how you can get it. And of course, there's nothing to stop you from going up there. But of course, Tallahassee is I'd say it's about 3 hours from here. Yeah. So anyway, this is where the state initiative is called FLIN, Florida Library Information Network. And libraries that have joined it, they'll have on their web pages. So if you do a catalog search, and I've done this, I've used it in my county, and they don't have it, it immediately opens up a window where you can request it by interlibrary loan. Now, it is somewhat limited. I think you can only do like 5 items at a time, but you just, click, you want to borrow it, and within about 2 weeks, your library will let you know. It'll show up on your record as a whole, as if it were one of their things. So it's definitely worth looking into, and I hope Lake County actually gets into it, because I found it works very well. And you just return it to your library just like it was one of their materials, and they'll send it back. Now, another way to find these towns is in the Florida archives, and they have 2 good collections. This card is actually a record of my grandfather, Delton Holder, and he was a resident of Trilby in 1918. I have no idea why he was there, but that's where he listed his residence when he rejoined the Army. And in fact, it says here, he had originally enlisted in Columbus, Ohio. And I don't know why he was in Ohio, but he had a career mostly in motor transport, and he drove buses for companies like Greyhound later in life, and he worked in the motor pool in the Army. Although there was a strange aberrant phase where he got court-martialed because he was cooking breakfast and a superior officer told him to hurry it up. And he was supposed to have said, according to the transcript I have, to get the F out of my kitchen or I will throw you out, or words to that effect. So anyway, but mostly he was in motor transport, and maybe that's why he was there in Columbus and here in Trilby. Now you can also do a map search, and the Florida State Library has an excellent map collection, and you can actually see a lot of things like Indian Springs, ACRON, all these towns that don't exist, and it'll help you try and fix it. So if you go looking, you might be able to use these old maps. And other map sources will be county collections, city collections. There's a lot of different maps out there. And also, you know, historical documents, and this is actually Flora Calls and Walter E. Disney's marriage license from 1887, and it says they were residents of Akron at the time. And so at least you know that according to Lake County Clerk, that towns that you don't see on today's maps did actually exist. And of course, historical societies. Now, this is the Lake County Historical Society, but you should also go there. You should also go to the Leesburg Historical Society. And one way or another, they can probably help you. And of course, another source is newspapers. Now, we have a full run of newspapers from the Daily Commercial going back to 1927. Unfortunately, there are only fragments existing before that. But like I said, some of these towns lasted into the 1920s, and there might be some mention, and also there might be like a retrospective. We actually have a book, A History of Lake County, that was published in 1929. There's a lot of places to look. I mean, I didn't even actually put this in my notes, and it's just reeling out of my head. And also newspapers and magazines. And what's really interesting is that University of Florida has a digital newspaper historical library that anyone can use, and you can search them, download them, you know, print them, and also more modern publications like Lake Sumter magazine sometimes publish these retrospectives saying, did you know this town or these towns were in this county? So you should always go and look. And of course, Rick Reed's one from 2019, it's styled, did you know? And it's a perfect example of how to find this stuff. And also websites. There are a lot of historical websites like floridahikes.com. There are actual signs. This is from the Ocala State Forest, and they just direct you. One goes south to State Road 50, another one goes north to Bronson, and somewhere you will actually find them. Another place I could recommend are local hiking clubs. Hiking clubs can probably, they go to these places all the time. You know, you join the club and you just go along with them. And now blogs, now this is reflecting on Walt. This is the one where I got the picture of Walter Elias and Flora. And it's all about Walt Disney and about his relationship with Florida. He had quite a few relatives here. And I think it even has a picture of him visiting his aunt here in Lake County. And there's also a number of online videos on YouTube and other places. And if you put in like Florida ghost towns, you'll have all these videos that hikers made. Here we are in Akron, here we are in Conant, here we are, what was this town or that town. And now this one is actually about a ghost town and cemetery in my county, Citrus. So, and it can be very, very valuable, but remember they are very subjective. And I'll give you a good example of that because before we went to Hawaii, we saw a lot of videos and we were mostly concerned about the health situation there, which is extensive. I mean, in order to go, we had to set up an account with the Hawaii Department of Health. We had to upload our vaccination cards, give our flight numbers and times of arrival on airlines and everything. They actually screen you there in the airport. And in fact, when we went out, United Airlines actually had pre-screening on our layover in Denver. So we wanted to find out more about that. We wanted to make sure they were going to let us in because if you don't do any of these things, if you're not vaccinated, there's a 10-day mandatory quarantine. And we were there for 9 full days. So you see why it's important. However, they can also be misleading because a number of videos said, oh, don't go to Waikiki Beach. It's too crowded. Go to Fort DeRussy Beach, go to this beach, go to that beach. And we had no problem there in Waikiki. I was sitting right there in front of the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. You know, there's plenty of room. But of course, you know, I'm from New York City and, you know, you get about this much space on Coney Island Beach. So my standards, I guess, are different from other people's. Before we leave, but you never saw that one coming. How about ghost roads? Not all ghosts are towns. And this is a picture of a ghost road. And this is an early 20th century brick highway. And there are several of them in the state. This is called the Pershing Highway. And it actually was the first road between DeLand and Volusia County to Daytona Beach, about 20-something miles away. And it was opened in about 1919, and it was used until 1947. And this stretch is in the middle of the Tiger Bay Wildlife Management Area. So if you happen to be out that way, you can actually go and actually walk on it. And that's a map I got from the Florida Department of Maps. They actually clearly show the Pershing Highway right here. They have the old Daytona Road. This is Route 4, which is Route 92, and Route 92 essentially, and the Daytona Speedway highway essentially killed Pershing. But government websites can be very, very great to go into stuff like this, and I would definitely use them. And before, this is my plug. This is a book we've got. It's called Ghost Towns of Florida by James R. Warnicki. And he wrote this in 1971. So our copy is a little bit on the beat up side, but it is perfectly able to be used. And he gave descriptions of the towns. He gave locations. and they're for the entire state of Florida, but there quite a few of them were around here. So if you're ever interested, I would definitely go upstairs, second floor, ask them in our Florida to see our Florida room. And I can't tell you how great this book was. And we have a few others, Florida Back Roads, Florida Travel, out of the way places in Florida. So, you know, I cannot recommend them highly enough. So this is the end of my presentation, but I am totally open for questions. Yes?
The Eldorado train that you mentioned, did that travel across Lake Harris or was it around the perimeter of it?
It was mostly the perimeter, but they did have apparently a railroad bridge. I guess there was sort of like a bulge in the lake, and it just seemed easier instead of going all the way around it to just build directly across it.
Maybe it's that between Big Lake Harris and Little Lake Harris where there's a bridge now. Maybe that was it.
I'm sure that probably was because actually, if you drive to Key West, you can actually see the old overseas railroad bridge, which was destroyed in the hurricane of 1935, and it was converted by the U.S. government into a motor road. Although it was a very poor motor road, some of my sources indicated that when cars passed each other too closely, they would knock the mirrors off the driver's side. So it was a little tight, which is why they had to build a new road. So yeah, it's possible.
Also, I have another question about Kismet. Where was that located? Which county?
Yeah,
Like where?
yeah, it was
related
Lake
to us?
County. It was up close to Paisley, around that area. You know, a lot of the stuff seemed, for some reason, northern Lake County was very badly hit by the freeze and other things. And so like, there's like 4 or 5 ghost towns up that way.
Also, I wanted to mention, this is Deb, by the way. Hi, everybody. I wanted to mention about the interlibrary loan because I found this confusing when I started working here, and I think I just wanted to clarify for everybody. We have library loans from all 16 libraries in our county. So anything that you see within the Lake County Library System, you can order, put it on hold is what it's technically called. And we bring it in and notify you when it comes in. And what Tom was mentioning was the interlibrary loan amongst other library systems in the state, which is not something that we do here. So that's the difference. I just didn't want there to be any questions about,
yeah,
if there's a book in, you know, Lady Lake Library, can I get it? Yes, you can. You can order it. We'll get it in here to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, one thing we should also add is that we can go into WorldCat and we can find another library system closest geographically to us. So if there's something in Hernando County that's not too hard to get to, then just, yeah, you know, at least you know they've got it.
Well, I don't see any other questions. I'm going to come up closer so people can hear me. Maybe I'm going to give a camera for a second.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Tom. We miss Tom here. I know you guys do too. We're really lucky that he comes back every month. We just booked him for 2 shows in December.
Mm-hmm.
One is, oh, tell me.
Oh yeah, it's
Christmas in the White House.
Christmas in the White House. That was the original program we were going to do, but when last week I was at the Arizona Memorial, it was brought home to everyone there that this was the 80th anniversary of the attack. Yeah, and I found a great news source that because there's very little audio, that there's only one live on the scene broadcast from Honolulu, and it's only 90 seconds long because they took command of the cable. So that was it. But I found another site on the internet that actually has Honolulu police calls from that day. And some of them, yeah, I'm going to play 1 or 2 of them. It'll be really fun.
So this will be a new program that he will be presenting the first week of December. And then the third week of December will be the Christmas at the White House. We're making a little bit of a change.
Mhm.
By then, maybe we'll be in person. We don't know. But until then, this format works out great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. You'll be getting a link on the recording. Let us know if you have any ideas for future programs, of course. And thank you, Tom.
All right, thank you, or as they
Bye.
say in the islands, mahalo.